Welcome to the Federal. I'm K.S. Dakshinamurthy. Ukraine, as all of you know, is a new international flavor of the season. The world is witnessing a rare eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation for the last few days between the East and the West. The West led by the US and its allies in Europe, and the East by Russia, supported by China. It brings back memories of the Cuban Missile Crisis exactly 60 years ago, when the world was on the brink of a nuclear war between the then Soviet Union and the United States. As we speak, the rare standoff in Ukraine has grave implications for the rest of the world in the event of a conflict breaking out. Shorn of all the verbiage, the reason is simple. The West wants Ukraine within the NATO bloc, while Russia wants NATO to keep off Ukraine. Point here is neither is the US willing to agree, nor is Russia backing off from a threat of invading Ukraine, unless it is assured that Kiev will not join NATO. Some 150,000 troops, Russian troops, are massed on its border with Ukraine, and aggressively, very aggressive military exercises are going on in Belarus, a Russian ally in the neighborhood. As the adage goes, when two elephants fight, it is the grass under their feet that gets hurt. India is in that position because it can neither afford to support or oppose one against the other. What if it is forced into a position where it has to take such a call, and what consequences it can have for India? To get an educated view on this conundrum, we have with us former Indian ambassador, M Ganapathi, who was based in Moscow in the late 70s and again in the mid 90s, to explain what the options are and the best way for India to deal with the situation. Welcome, Mr. Ganapathi.
Good afternoon, Mr. Dakshinamurthy. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure talking to you and through you to your federal viewers.
Thank you, Mr. Ganapathi. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure for us as well and an honor as well. Mr. Ganapathi, before we go deeper into the issue, how do you see the situation as it stands?
The Ukraine-Russia conundrum or the problem is not something which started in the 21st, which started now. It is very interesting that President Putin, in his long article on the Kremlin website of July 2021, went to the background history and all that of Russia-Ukraine relations, which he called more as brothers together, and that there were many trying to break this partnership or the brotherhood. Importantly, when you look at Russia-Ukraine relationship or partnership over the last 100 years since the formation of the Soviet Union, I think the Soviet Union, as you know, was formed in 1917, which is roughly 105 years ago, and disintegrated in 91, which was roughly 31 years ago. In the period, of course, Ukraine was the second largest republic in the USSR. It had a very singularly important role within the constitution and also of the structure of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. In fact, the other point is wherever Russia felt that strategic industries had to be located, that is the USSR, it was located in the Ukraine. Right. Coming to 1991, when the Soviet Union disintegrated and the Russian Federation became the successor state, of course, all the states, 15 states, then were given the option. It's very interesting that the USSR constitution allowed for states to break away from the mother body, which was the USSR. Yeah. And Ukraine was among the first, which went out in December 1991 to form the new republic. Then comes somewhere in 2008, when you had the so-called Orange Revolution, the problem of the pro-Soviet president, pro-Russian president, in Ukraine, who was dislodged, and then not an anti-Russian, but somewhat a different constitution president had come in. And then there was the problem of Russia felt that perhaps the Ukrainians were trying to rush headlong towards the West. Of course, one of the reasons why Yanukovych, the pro-Russian president, was also dislodged was because of his scuttling further discussions between the EU and Ukraine on Ukraine joining the European Union. Come 2014, if you look at it, that is when Crimea was annexed by the Russian Federation. There's one very important difference between then and now, between 2014 and 2022, is that on 28th February, I think, President Putin wrote to the Russian parliament, that's the Duma, seeking permission for deployment of Russian troops in Ukraine to settle the problem there, which is very, very significant because this has not happened now. And that is when the Russian troops went to Ukraine, annexed Crimea. The issue again came to the fore in terms of the eastern provinces of Ukraine, that is the Donbas region of Donetsk and Luhansk, also trying to settle their own issues with the central government in Kiev. And that is where the Minsk Accord came into play. And I think the Minsk Agreement, of course, had various things in terms of withdrawal of troops, no offensive weapons within particular region, greater autonomy for the eastern Ukrainian provinces. Russia has always felt that Ukraine was not keen to implement the Minsk Accords. And then you had the Normandy discussions between the Minsk Four, if I could call it. Then, of course, it is also very interesting to say that the temperatures rose high only as late as December 2021. You might recall the meeting between Presidents Biden and President Putin in Geneva, June last year. That was the first visit of President Putin outside the Russian Federation following COVID. And I think even President Biden's statement was very, very forward-looking in the sense that he felt that this was a person whom he could discuss with, that is with President Putin, and that President Putin felt that he was boxed into a corner, not only by the West, but also by China. I think temperatures got a little hot. I think perhaps, in the end of last year and early this year, because I think Russia felt that the West was violating the red lines for it, which was no expansion of NATO. Russia always felt that the West was pushing it to a corner, that it was not recognizing the concerns of Russia, that it had brought in offensive missiles to the Russian border, that stationing missiles in Poland and Romania and other places. And despite all the difficulties, there had been sanctions imposed in 2014. Russia was also a member of the North Atlantic Council. The discussions terminated in 2014, put in cold storage. Russia was shunted out literally, shown the door in the G7 talks. It was G7, if you recall. So I think what Russia perhaps had felt that it had been the doors were shut by the West, not only for interlocution and dialogue, but also to address its concern. The West, of course, feels that Russia moving in would undermine the established order, that Russia moving into Ukraine will affect the West in the Black Sea and other areas. Western troops have not yet entered Ukraine. Not that the Western troops are going to enter. I think this will be a war fought of West will fight its war on using Ukraine's shoulders if it comes to it. As they do.
We are also interested in actually India in some sense, because the reason is that India is close both to the US and to Russia. And it's in a very difficult situation, So has India faced a similar such kind of a situation in the past at any time where it has had to make a very difficult choice? I mean,
I think
two big paths.
62, you mentioned the Cuban crisis. Of course, that was not an issue where we were focused because it was resolved through, that was an eyeball to eyeball in the sense the West had blockaded Cuba and the Russians had to withdraw the missiles, and America also withdrew its missile from the Western theater. For India, the important statement which was made on our reaction to the developments in Central Europe, if I can call it that, Eurasia, was the statement made by Ambassador Tirumurti in the United Nations of 31st of January, where he talked of legitimate security interests and everything discussed through diplomacy. And diplomacy should be given a chance, and the entire thing should be resolved peacefully. And that has been our view. Of course, we always have this problem in the sense, even during Crimea, I think we we did not go overboard in criticizing Russian Federation, and the President did thank us. One of the most difficult situations, unlike today, was faced in 1979 when the Soviet Union went into Afghanistan, if you recall. That was a very, very tricky situation. And Mrs. Gandhi then came to power in January, if you recall. And President Giscard d'Estaing was the chief guest at the Republic Day function on January 26th. And people did ask Mrs. Gandhi, what do you say about the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan? She was very categorical in saying that we discuss these things within the confines of four walls, and we don't criticize our friends, but we take our views, we convey our views as they should be conveyed to them, and which was correct, because we did talk very strongly to the Russian Soviet Union, saying that it was a foolish step on their part. We have around 20,000 students and nationals in Ukraine. In fact, Ukraine will be a very major destination for Indian students during the time of the Soviet Union and later also, medical and other. Ukraine is an important trading partner. Trade is of the order of around 2.6 billion. 2.5 billion imports from Ukraine and around 500 million exports from India. Ukraine is among the largest pharmaceutical export destinations of India. India is the fifth largest trade partner of Ukraine. So I think, and also, as I mentioned in the initial remarks itself, when the Soviet Union set up, industrialization of the Soviet Union took place, some of the key industries were also given to Ukraine. Some tanks and some aircraft parts and other things. And Ukraine is an important supplier of certain defense equipment to India. So, I think in the initial years of the Soviet formation, I remember when I was Joint Secretary East Europe, I had to deal with Russia, Ukraine and all. We had a lot of difficulty with Ukraine because they were looking towards Pakistan in a greater way of expanding the defense cooperation, which then came down, and then I think India was the key partner. So for Ukraine, India is also an important partner in terms of its political, economic, and defense partnerships. And it's a vibrant thing. So, and investments are also there.
Right. See, right now we are kind of on the edge as far as Ukraine is concerned. Now, let us assume the invasion does happen, and let's say the situation boils over. What would be the consequences if India opts for one side or the other? If you take each one, like say, if India opts for Russia, what would happen? And if India, opts for the US, what would be the consequences?
Well, I think let's hope the confrontation doesn't take place.
Doesn't happen, obviously.
There is still time, as they say. Nobody knows President Putin's mind. That is very, very important. Hypothetically, if there were to be the hot war or Russia moves its troops, if it happens, I think we would continue to hold our stand. I don't think we would take a pro-West or a pro-Russian stand. We would continue to maintain, because it's also significant and important to point out that this entire year a member of the United Nations Security Council.
Yes.
So if there's a debate in the council, the debate which took place on 31st January, very interesting, I should say, that Russia, China did not agree to a discussion. They voted against the discussion. India, Gabon, and Kenya abstained. But 10 members agreed for a discussion. It was not you can't veto move to a discussion. You can only veto a resolution. So 9 members, if they vote for a discussion, it goes through. So you had 10 members for discussion, and the discussion was there, and it was along expected lines. And that is where Ambassador Tirumurti's statement comes to the fore. I would say that we might perhaps repeat the same stand. And I think Russia will veto any discussion. Yes, discussion might go on. We may, even if we agree to a discussion, and if it comes to a vote, we may abstain on the vote. But we may abstain, and therefore that may be very important. We will continue to emphasize the need for peaceful dialogue and diplomacy to resolve the issue, even though it may get out of hand. So I think we would take this, our position, which is not neutral. Abstention is not neutral. Abstention is calling for, neutral would be no vote. The option is there. You just say, so that is not there. So obviously that is what it is.
So, but abstinence in the context could mean one way or the other, depending on what the.
Of course, our explanation of vote, in the UN Security Council, after you vote, you're allowed the option to explain your vote. And you can explain why this is so. Because I think the West should also understand that we cannot be their ally, which we are not.
Right.
We are only partners. And even Quad, for that matter, does not have any military connotation or activity. It is purely based on humanitarian, economic, and other related activities. So we would explain that our position and our geographical location would not permit us to criticize one or the other. We will say that we do not support invasion or military activities or military action taken by one country or another. We would definitely put that in, because that will also help us vis-a-vis China, because China takes military activity. So we would say that we do not support military activity, but we feel that diplomacy should be given a chance, and sanctions also would not pave the way for resolution of the crisis. So the big powers, that is Russia and the Americans, with Ukraine should sit and resolve the issue in the larger interest of global peace and security.
If you extend the Ukrainian situation, that is vis-a-vis India, what we are also seeing now is that a new kind of a global configuration is happening. So Russia and China are now pretty close to each other. You have, of course, the West. And then India is also having a problem with China. So, in terms of foreign policy options, you think there is a requirement to kind of make India's stance clear in such a way that these kind of situations can be, easily, dealt with? Or is there any such thing where, or do we go back to our old system of non-alignment and say, we just don't ally ourselves? Is it possible? Especially when China comes into the picture?
We have clearly said that Quad is not an alliance. It is only a partnership of 4 countries. Whereas AUKUS has military connotations. How we would do it is we would go to the corridors of power in the various countries. Like we would go to Moscow, visit the Russian foreign ministry. Our prime minister maybe would talk to President Putin and explain our position. We would do so on the Capitol Hill in Washington. And our ambassador would also visit the State Department. And maybe Prime Minister will talk to President Biden and say, this is our view. And, for us in the larger national interest, it's always good if Russia and US come to an understanding, because that would moderate China's role in the region. And we would like that not to happen. A relationship of equanimity or some sort of balance between US and Russia would help us further strengthen India-US, India-Russia relationship. Mind you, we have RIC and BRICS also. Russia, India, and China are members. So I think it's going to be a very interesting configuration and interplay of things which happen. So I think we'll have to monitor and watch the situation and then perhaps take it forward. Of course, the last thing which any of us would want, I'm sure even the West would not want, and so would not the Europeans perhaps. The only beneficiary of all this would be China. We would not like a hot war, because the sanctions against Russia, what does it mean? They've already have so many sanctions on the plate. Okay, they'll say Putin cannot visit US. He says, so what? Doesn't make any difference to him. I mean, sanctions should be rational, should be calibrated, should be moderated, should be carefully thought out. And it doesn't. And let me also add that President Putin is a very sharp person. He understands the situation far better than many of the global leaders today. I sat across the table in discussions where he was there. I would definitely say he's on top of the brief which is given to him. He understands the situation. He dealt very well with Angela Merkel. We'll have to see how he goes with Olaf Scholz. He did well with Macron. Of course, he is doing very well with quote-unquote dear friend Xi Jinping. And he's got a very good equation with our Prime Minister. In fact, Russia also understands that India has its own relationship.
That's
One thing, of course, I'll have to see is what would be the effect on Russia's arms exports to India and the US
right.
reaction.
Right.
How would that happen?
Yes.
The prayers are keep fingers crossed, no war, no
Yes.
invasion, and our relationship
Yeah.
with everybody stays as they were. Because
Yeah.
we don't want,
Yeah.
it'll upset the oil market, it'll upset the
Right.
economy.
Right.
There'll be the spin will be so much. It will
Yes.
affect, America is happy that Russia has brought Iran back to the table. So
Right.
there are so many other things, so we'll have to
Yeah.
carefully
It
monitor
is.
and see how things develop.
Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador Ganapathi. It was absolutely great. It's very lucid, and it's very useful also because there's been so much of talk about this. Thanks for joining and talking to us at the Federal, and looking forward to more such conversations with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dakshinamurthy. It's a pleasure talking to the Federal, and always anytime. And as they
Thank
say,
you.
keep fingers crossed, no war. That's our hope and prayer.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.